time to do this for us. I appreciate it. I wanted to start off, we'll start off with sort of the basics if you can, and I'll start with you, Chief Sorenson. Explain a little bit of what is the current state of things in terms of how you guys work with the city of Battleground.
We've developed an excellent relationship over the period of the contract, which was January 1st, 2016. And in that period of time, we've worked on planning for the future to increase and improve services with the growth of the community. And all through that relationship, we've communicated well and worked together to plan for the future and the changes we face.
In terms of the coverage for the city, Erin, can you talk a little bit about what things were like before and what Fire District 3 was able to bring to the table in terms of sort of beefing up coverage within the city limits?
Yeah, I think there's kind of twofold. One, just the level of communication that we've had with Fire District 3 versus our last provider is increased quite a bit. We have a pretty good working relationship as far as, including each other with meetings and communications and so forth. And then the coverage piece, they've done a lot of work to be able to provide a lot of coverage in a sustainable manner, which has been very encouraging to see. They're always kind of reevaluating what they're doing and taking a look at better ways to provide that service more efficiently. And it's been really fun to kind of watch as that's transpired. So
the previous contract was with Clark County Fire and Rescue, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Talk a little bit about the end of that contract and the negotiation and how you guys came to end up with Fire District 3.
Yeah, so the city decided to go out and look at some other options. That was kind of the first step for some long-term planning. We knew that we couldn't continue to provide fire service the way we've been providing it because it's just not sustainable. So our goal was to go out for an RFP and see if we could continue to provide a contract service at a lower rate to kind of get us through the interim so we could look at a more long-term sustainable plan. So Fire District 3 was the one that had the lower bid coming out of that process, and they provided a higher level of service at a lower rate. So it was a no-brainer for us to go in that direction.
Then let me ask you, Chief Sorenson, how were you able to provide better service at a lower price, or a lower rate, I should say?
Well, the rate was set. It was the levy rate that we had at the time. And then that changes over time, depending on the increase in value or decrease, whatever that may be. The way we did it is just kind of the model that we use through our staffing models. And I think geographically we were in a good location as well. The city and the district are a good match to cover a response area that we can share resources and get to each other's jurisdictions pretty easily. So that helped us too. I think our financial position helped us. We were in a good position to do this through good planning over the number of years. Our Fire Commission board has always been fiscally conservative, and so we're in good financial condition. We were then, and we still are, in terms of capital. We don't have debt, and just our response models using different types of apparatus to respond and trying to keep costs as low as we can.
There was some criticism raised during some of the public hearing phase of this, that perhaps that initial contract in 2016 was not negotiated well or wasn't the best deal for both parties involved, and that brought us to where we are now. Let me ask you, first of all, to respond to that, because understanding that if this doesn't go through, and we'll get to that a little bit more in a second, that your rates are going to have to go up in terms of what you're asking the city to pay in order to continue to provide the levels of service that you've been able to provide. So respond to that criticism a little bit of, was that initial contract sort of a lost leader type of thing to maybe get us to this discussion down the road?
Absolutely not. The rate at the time that we started this was $1.42, and that was as a result of the lid lift election that we ran in 2017. It's a 6-year lid, which allows us to collect 6% additional annually. The problem that we have in the state of Washington is the 1% levy limitation. So as costs go up, you can only increase your budget by 1% unless it's a voter-approved levy lid lift. And that's really the problem that we're facing now in the city. So in the district, we are able to fund those service needs with that levy lid lift. In the city, they didn't have that levy lid lift. However, our principal philosophy with this was that the district resident and the city resident would pay the same amount of money for fires and EMS services. And that's kind of what we're facing now, and that's what this ask is about.
From your perspective, in terms of that negotiation for the contract in 2016, and then what would have to happen if you had to go back and renegotiate the contract at the end of next year, correct?
2021, yeah.
So you'd have to start negotiating in 2020 to start that service agreement in 2021. Your understanding of sort of the dynamics of how we get from $1.35 now to almost $1.50 if that has to be renegotiated.
Yeah, so, this, again, as I stated before, this is kind of the long-term plan, and it's worked out very well. Fire District 3 came out of that providing the best service for the lowest cost, and they've delivered on that promise. And the intent of the RFP and the contract has done just that, has given us that time to go back and build a plan moving forward for what makes the most sense to continue to provide fire and medical emergency services to our citizens. If annexation isn't successful and we do have to go back and renegotiate that contract, it's going to be up to our board members or city council members. But long term, there's really no way around it at this point. We would be looking at cuts of service, and that's not only going to be from the fire side, but it's going to affect police and parks and road maintenance as well, just because there's only so much money to go around. So,
if you were to have to renegotiate that contract should annexation fail, you would be looking at some cuts to service, especially if you had to stay even somewhere close to the existing contract rate that you have right now. Can you describe a little bit in your mind of what that might look like from Fire District 3's perspective?
Well, this is something that we're looking forward at, and this would be after a negotiation of the board of commissioners in the city. And some of the things that may be impacted would be staffing, which results in longer response times. And that also could impact the insurance rating that the city enjoys at this point. And ultimately just a lower level of service, less available resources to deal with the 911 calls.
In terms of other possible options, other sources of revenue, just from the city's perspective, I know hearing from Chief Richardson and hearing some of what you've talked about in terms of what the city might be looking at should you have to go to a rate that is now higher than what you're actually collecting in property taxes. Just talk to folks a little bit about what it might look like if you have to go back and renegotiate that contract.
yeah, so from a city standpoint, we're going to be looking at cuts overall to help offset that cost. We'd obviously be trying to work with the district to lower that cost, but they can only do so much and provide the same level of service. So we'd be looking at service cuts from the fire standpoint as well as from the police standpoint, and kind of trying to divvy those out amongst the different departments. Right now there's no other revenue source that's available without going to a vote of the people. So we would definitely be having to cut service levels to continue to move forward.
Let me ask you the next question then. The city has already approved a reduction in utility taxes. It's a 12% reduction, which represents what, 43%, give or take?
10 percentage points reduction. So from 22% down to 12%. So 46% cut on the overall
46%, okay.
that bill, or tax rate.
Some of the comments that I've seen from people online is that that's great, they appreciate that, but they're worried that that could happen, and then all of a sudden those rates would start to creep back up as you approve a 1% here, 1% there. Is there any assurance that you can give folks in terms of what the city's view is about utility taxes if this annexation is approved and the cuts go forward into the future?
Yeah. So, we've already passed the resolution that would make the reduction effective. Our council has had a lot of conversation on this, and we talked a lot about what does that cut look like. We wanted to make sure we did something that was big enough to offset the cost of annexation and give back to the community, but yet not get us into a situation where we would have to then come back later and continue to increase those taxes. So we did a lot of work to determine that 10 percentage point cut would kind of be even enough to where it would give us a little bit of time moving through annexation to make up the deficit that we've gotten into and then start to reevaluate. We're working all on projected dollar amounts at this point. So we feel like we've found the middle ground, and our council has expressed the desire to continue to decrease that utility tax rate as we kind of level off and see how that works and what revenue streams are coming in. But again, it is up to the council at the time. So that's definitely a question that I would encourage our citizens to ask our elected officials.
Should annexation be approved, in your mind, what would that mean for Fire District 3 in terms of what you guys could do? How would that stabilize you and allow you to plan longer term?
Well, the projections on revenue would be easier to identify, which allows us to plan farther. Currently, with the contract, we're only looking at a certain number of years, and then if the contract is nullified or ends, then we've got to look at what expenditures we're using or planning for those years. If this is approved, then we know we are here. We know that the city is in the fire district, and then we can plan long-term for capital improvements and response needs and staffing needs as the community continues to grow.
In terms of the city's flexibility, would there remain the ability, I know you've determined at this point that it wouldn't be fiscally responsible to start your own fire service within the city. Would there be that option down the road if you decided that at some point the population had grown or the city borders had grown and it made more sense to maybe step back and then have a city-run fire department?
I don't foresee that happening. As we continue to increase population, an area that we have to cover, that cost is just going to continue to grow. So if it's not financially feasible at this point, I can't see it being that way in the future. And then I'm not quite sure about the legalities if we do go through with annexation, how to back out of that, but we'd have to do some more research into that.
Let me ask a little bit, and I know this is still a big unknown. There's a lot of legal back and forth over the $30 car tabs initiative, 976, right? That was approved, but is going through the legal process as many of these things do. So the city is kind of, you don't really know at this point where that's going to shake out. If it were to eventually go into law and you guys were to lose some of that funding, is there potential at that point that a lot of the things that you're hoping annexation would pay for, better parks, more police, more road maintenance, would potentially have to go back into shoring up the road funds?
There's definitely an unknown with 976 so far. We do know two things off the gate. One is we're going to lose about $290,000 annually from battleground resident car tab fees, and the other is the unknown on state grants that we would be eligible for, that we currently use for a lot of matching funds and to help supplement city funds for road projects. Now, with that said, we've already kind of in our master plan for annexation put about $750,000 towards road maintenance improvements if annexation were to pass. So, we would be able to make up that $290,000 and still see more going towards maintenance and preservation. So we're still going to see a benefit of that. On the flip side of that, we're also looking at some other options and revenue sources that we could help to make up that $290,000. But I think the bigger impact that we're going to see is not being able to have that grant funding available to match some of our newer projects. But it'll definitely may have an impact on what we're able to do with money coming from annexation, but I think we'll be able to still increase our maintenance.
You guys have both been open to hosting any kind of public forum and talking to folks about this. Has anybody taken you up on that offer? And if so, what has the public input been like? What are you guys hearing, and what's your kind of general sense? I'll start with you, Chief Sorenson, on how people are feeling about this.
A lot of the questions have been similar to your questions. There have been questions on how it impacts the district voter compared to the city voter. And that's an important question. In the district, the rate won't change. The levy rate is set for a number of years, so there's no change in cost in the district. There's been questions about board configuration and how will that impact this. And the Fire District 3 board will represent the district and the city will be able to vote on those positions in the future, whereas now they can't. There's been questions about our financial stability if we do take on the city, and the response has been that we feel that we can continue our conservative fiscal management and, in fact, share costs in, for example, administration. New specialized apparatus that we purchase, we can share those costs. Again, geographically, it's a good location, and it is a good partnership. A lot of times, these things don't actually save money, but in this case, we can show that it has, and it will in the future. So those are the kind of questions that I've received, and I wouldn't say that the response has been negative. It's just been seeking more information about what this is and how it impacts, different localities within the district. We can serve several different communities now: Brush Prairie, Hawkinson, Bennersburg, Hyacin, and then, of course, Battleground with the contract. And we've been able to serve each one of those effectively using our response planning and strategic planning that the board's done for a number of years. So those are the kind of questions we've gotten, and I think overall it's been pretty positive from my estimation.
We've heard a lot of folks lately. The term tax fatigue has been getting used a lot because we saw the education funding, the one-time tax relief that goes away after this year at the state level for property taxes. We saw what happened in Camas with the pool bond and going down with 91% of people voting it out, the mayor losing a write-in election largely over that issue. Is there concern from your part, and how do you explain to people sort of how to balance this? Yes, it's going to cost you a little bit more, but here's what you get out of it. And what has the response been to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest questions that comes up is, when does it stop and you keep increasing our taxes, and what are we going to get for that increase of tax, and what is that increase going to look like? And so we've put a lot of work and effort into kind of putting together some calculators that are out on our website to help people realize what that increased cost is going to be. But, the city of Battleground hasn't done an increase in taxes in a very long time, and it's gotten to the point we've been the lowest tax rate within the county for a while, and we're at that tipping point is, what kind of services and what kind of community do we want to be, and in order to continue moving forward, it's time to go to the voters and ask that question, and ultimately be up to them. So
I'll give you just a last opportunity, each of you, start with you, Chief Sorenson, to just give your closing argument, I guess.
Well, I've said it a few times, and I think that it's important to recognize that this kind of service it's not free. It costs money, and with this proposal, residents of the city would pay the fire district directly. It would be dedicated to fire and EMS, and we've got a long history of good fiscal management, and we would continue to do that. In the district, we're committed to the things that we've promised there, and we're doing that. We've been here 3 years. It's gone very well. We've had good service levels in the city, and we plan to do that in the future. And with this, we feel that we can do a better job in that down the road in planning and keeping up with the needs here in this area.
Yeah, public safety is definitely a priority for us, and we feel should be a priority for our communities. And we feel that this solution of annexation is fair and equitable for all property owners and gives them a say in the types of emergency services that are provided. And it also allows us a little bit more flexibility to kind of focus on some of the things that the community has told us they want to do. Out of our community vision project, we've heard a lot of feedback that we wanted more community involvement. We need better, traffic regulations, and so this gives us the ability to kind of start focusing more on some of the things that our citizens are asking for, and still maintaining that high level of public safety.